Think about the last time you sat in a dentist's chair. Maybe the sound of the drill made your skin crawl. Maybe you dreaded the bill more than the root canal. Americans spend billions each year on their smiles braces. Whitening, veneers, cleanings, fillings. We complain about cavities, gum disease, wisdom teeth. But here's the truth. Our dental problems are nothing compared to the nightmares nature has cooked up over millions of years. Imagine a predator with a built-in buzzsaw for a jaw, or a dinosaur carrying 2,000 teeth like a living food processor, or a prehistoric eel with tooth tips sharper than a surgeon's scalpel. These weren't science fiction monsters. They were real animals that once ruled the earth, and their mouths were equal parts fascinating and terrifying. Our own teeth fragile, cavity-prone, and often crooked might not win any awards. But compared to these prehistoric contraptions, they're downright boring. And maybe that's a good thing. If you think flossing is annoying, imagine trying to brush a mouth with 1,000 molars or trying to keep a buzzsaw of teeth from rusting. So buckle up. We're about to take a tour through the strangest, scariest, and most jaw-dropping, pun intended, dental adaptations in history. From guillotine-like marsupials in Australia to hammer-jawed sea reptiles. From hippos with too many front teeth to sharks that look like saw blades with fins. This is a trip your dentist would never sign up for. Before we dive headfirst into prehistoric jaws of doom, let's pause for a reality check. Our teeth, as frustrating as they can be, set the baseline. In the United States, oral health is practically its own culture. We've got the Hollywood smile obsession. Orthodontists fitting teens with braces like it's a rite of passage. And entire aisles at Walmart devoted to whitening strips. According to the CDC, more than 90% of American adults will have a cavity at some point in their lives. Gum disease affects almost half of adults over 30. By age 65, nearly 1 in 5 Americans has lost all their teeth. That's grim but still manageable compared to what's coming. Dentistry here is also big business. Between dental insurance plans, cosmetic procedures, and emergency visits, Americans spend tens of billions every year to keep their teeth in check. And let's be honest, most of us still forget to floss. Yet for all that hassle, our mouths are pretty straightforward. We've got 32 permanent teeth. Give or take a wisdom tooth or two. They wear down. They rot if we're careless. They can break, but they don't grow into guillotines. They don't spiral into saw blades. And they don't multiply into the thousands. That's where prehistoric life puts us to shame or maybe saves us. Because while modern humans fight cavities and pay for crowns, ancient animals were evolving some of the most bizarre dental weaponry the planet has ever seen. And if American dentists think their patients are a challenge, wait until they meet the first case study on our list, the marsupial lion. A predator so strange and so powerful that it makes today's big cats look like house kittens. Now, when you think of top predators, your mind probably jumps to lions, tigers, or maybe wolves. But Australia, as it so often does, had to do things its own weird way. Enter Thylacoleo carnifex, better known as the marsupial lion. First off, don't let the name fool you. This wasn't a true lion. In fact, it was a distant cousin of today's wombats and koalas. Cute family, terrifying black sheep. Thylacoleo grew to about the size of a lioness, maybe 200 pounds. But what it lacked in bulk, it made up for with a mouth straight out of a horror movie. Instead of the sharp canines you'd expect, this beast evolved oversized premolars shaped like little guillotines. These teeth weren't just sharp, they were broad, bladed, and built for shearing through flesh and bone. Imagine a paper cutter, but inside a predator's jaw. Those premolars worked in pairs, upper and lower, creating a killing mechanism no cat has ever matched. And then there was the bite. Pound for pound, Thylacoleo had the most powerful bite force of any mammal we know of. Stronger than lions, stronger than tigers, stronger even than hyenas with their bone-crunching jaws. When it clamped down on a victim's neck, it didn't need to wait for suffocation. It could crush a windpipe, snap a spinal cord, and sever major blood vessels in seconds. For comparison, when a lion in Africa brings down a zebra, the kill might take 15 long minutes. For Thylacoleo, It was over in less than one. That's not just deadlift's efficiency. Fossil evidence suggests these marsupial lions ambushed large herbivores, giant kangaroos, diprotodons, think SUV-sized wombats, maybe even the occasional unlucky human. Yep, humans were around to meet this monster. Aboriginal rock art seems to depict creatures with boxy heads and strange jaws that match Thylacoleo. And while humans eventually spread across the continent, hunted, and competed for prey, there's a good chance some of our ancestors learned firsthand just how terrifying those jaws could be. What makes Thylacoleo such a fascinating dental nightmare is that it broke the rules. It didn't have long saber teeth like Smilodon in North America. It didn't rely on sheer size like a bear. Instead, it turned its back teeth, those humble premolars we use for chewing into death machines. Only in Australia, right? So, lesson number 1 from the marsupial lion. When evolution has millions of years and an isolated continent to play with, it can retool the basic design of a mouth into something wildly lethal. And that's just the start. Because while this predator's guillotine jaws are terrifying, the next creature's teeth are so strange. Scientists didn't even know what they were looking at the first time they saw them. If the marsupial lion was terrifying because of its killing efficiency, Atopodentatus unicus is memorable for the opposite reason. It looked absolutely ridiculous. Picture this. Paleontologists in China uncover a fossil from the Middle Triassic period. Around 240 million years ago, they pieced together the skull and, well, it looks like somebody smashed it with a hammer. At first glance, it had a long jaw that appeared zipper-like, filled with hundreds of tiny teeth. Early reconstructions made it look like a prehistoric monster ready to unzip its face and swallow you whole. Scientists even gave it a fitting name, Atopodentatus, meaning peculiar teeth. But here's the twist. Later, better-preserved fossils revealed the truth, that zipper wasn't some alien nightmare, it was just a bad break. The skull had been crushed during fossilization. In reality, Atopodentatus had a wide, hammer-shaped snout with over 300 fine, fragile teeth lining its mouth. Instead of tearing through prey like a shark, it was probably shuffling along the seafloor, scraping up algae and plant matter. That made Atopodentatus one of the first known herbivorous marine reptiles. Think about that: before manatees, before sea turtles, before iguanas paddled out for a salad. There was this hammer-faced reptile reinventing the seafood diet by eating not seafood at all, just plants. Its feeding strategy was pretty clever. With that hammer-shaped mouth, it could rake or sweep algae off rocks, filter the bits through its rows of delicate teeth, and swallow the green mush. Not exactly nightmare fuel for humans, but a nightmare for any prehistoric dentist who had to deal with 300 brittle teeth packed into a jaw shaped like a shovel. What's fascinating here is the creativity of evolution. When oceans were recovering from the greatest extinction event in Earth's history, the Permian-Triassic extinction, life was experimenting. Predators with strange jaws, herbivores with stranger ones, and oddities like Atopodentatus filled ecological niches we didn't even know existed. For us today, the sight of this creature would have been more puzzling than terrifying. But imagine being a Triassic fish minding your business and watching this thing sweep its hammer face across the seafloor. You might not get eaten, but you definitely lose your appetite. And that's a theme we'll keep running into. Not every dental oddity was about killing. Sometimes, the nightmare was sheer complexity. And when it comes to sheer numbers of teeth, no group of dinosaurs can top the champions of chewing, the Hadrosaurs. If Atopodentatus wins the award for weird shape, Hadrosaurs, better known as the duck-billed dinosaurs, win hands down for sheer numbers. These plant-eating giants took dental engineering to a level that makes human orthodontics look like child's play. Take Edmontosaurus, a familiar face if you've ever visited a dinosaur museum in North America. At first glance, it looks like a big, harmless herbivore, 15,000 pounds of scaly bulk waddling around on 4 legs, tail straight as a beam. But open its mouth and you'll find a dentist's worst nightmare. More than 1,000 teeth packed into its jaws, arranged in what paleontologists call dental batteries. That term isn't just a metaphor. Picture rows of diamond-shaped teeth stacked side by side like bricks, layer upon layer, forming entire columns. As teeth wore down from constant grinding, new ones from the stack would slide up to replace them, like a conveyor belt of chompers. Each jaw had more than 50 of these columns, working together to form an enormous chewing surface. And these weren't simple plant grinders, either. Hadrosaur teeth had multiple layers of specialized tissues, up to 6 different kinds, making them more complex than our own molars. Some teeth acted like rasps, others like grinders, all working together to turn tough Jurassic vegetation into something resembling applesauce. Now, Edmontosaurus wasn't even the overachiever of the family. Enter Shantungosaurus, a true monster from Asia. At over 50 feet long, it was bigger than A.T. Rex and carried as many as 2,000 teeth in its mouth. Imagine brushing that smile. If your dentist recommends 2 minutes for 32 teeth, a Shantungosaurus would need nearly 2 hours just to get through its morning routine. It wasn't just about numbers, though. The efficiency of these dental batteries gave hadrosaurs a major evolutionary advantage. They could chew plants more thoroughly than most other dinosaurs, unlocking more energy from food and sustaining their enormous bodies. And the bigger the hadrosaur, the more teeth it needed. Size and tooth count went hand in hand. For predators like T. Rex, this made hadrosaurs prime targets, giant walking buffets with powerful chewing machines. But irony has a sense of humor. The king of the dinosaurs, with its banana-sized fangs, never had more than 60 teeth at a time. The prey it hunted carried more than 30 times that number. If dinosaurs had dentists, hadrosaurs would have kept them in business forever. So here's the takeaway. Sometimes the nightmare isn't about being bitten by a predator. Sometimes it's about logistics, managing a mouth so overcrowded with teeth that it looks more like an industrial machine than a face. And if you think that's unsettling, wait until we meet a group of eel-like creatures whose tooth tips were so sharp they make surgical scalpels look dull. Now let's rewind the clock way back hundreds of millions of years before the first dinosaurs stomped across the land. Picture the oceans of the Paleozoic era, long before whales or sharks took center stage. In these ancient waters swam a creature that looked like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, the conodont. Conodonts were small, eel-like animals, usually no more than a few feet long, with big bulging eyes and slippery bodies. At first glance, they didn't look like much. In fact, for decades scientists weren't even sure what they were. All that survived in the fossil record were their teeth, or rather, tooth-like elements. Tiny, sharp, mineralized structures so durable that they outlasted the rest of the animal's body. And those teeth? They were off the charts. Some were cone-shaped, others resembled little daggers, and some even looked like twisted blades or racks of fangs. But here's the kicker. The tips of conodont teeth were so fine that, under a microscope, they're about 1/20th the width of a human hair. That makes them 5 times sharper than a surgical scalpel. If you're shivering, you should be. These creatures carried the sharpest teeth in Earth's history. For a while, paleontologists hoped these eerie little animals might have been harmless filter feeders, straining plankton like modern-day anchovies. That would have been comforting, but the evidence says otherwise. The leading theory is that conodonts could manipulate their tooth elements with precision pinching, slicing, and grinding prey before shoving it into their throats. Some species might have scraped flesh like lampreys, while others pierced and diced like underwater blenders. And as if razor teeth weren't enough, some evidence suggests certain conodonts may even have been venomous, using specialized tooth elements to inject toxins, much like modern snakes. Imagine an eel, with the sharpest teeth on the planet, delivering a poisonous bite. Suddenly, the oceans of the Paleozoic don't sound like the friendliest place for a swim. Here in North America, the story of conodonts has an extra twist. Their tooth-like fossils are so common and durable that geologists actually use them to date layers of ancient rock. Every time you see a geology textbook describing Earth's Paleozoic timeline, chances are conodont teeth helped pin down those ages. So, in a weird way, These monsters of the deep are still shaping our understanding of the world today. The good news? Conodonts are long gone. They disappeared in the early Jurassic, leaving nothing but their microscopic teeth behind. But the idea of an animal with a mouthful of blades sharper than anything humans could ever forget, that's enough to make even the bravest dentist sweat. And if you thought that was bad, wait until you meet an extinct hippo that decided 2 front teeth weren't nearly enough. Modern hippos already have a reputation for being some of the most dangerous animals in Africa. They're massive, cranky, and armed with tusks and teeth that can snap a canoe in half. But as scary as they are, their extinct cousin Hexaprotodon makes them look almost modest. The name says it all: hexa for 6, proto for front. Unlike today's hippos, which sport a set of large incisors and tusks, Hexaprotodon had multiple pairs of oversized front teeth. Some individuals had up to 3 pairs of elongated incisors, jutting forward like giant ivory chisels. Imagine a hippo already built like a tank, now add a mouth bristling with 6 spear-like front teeth. It's the kind of thing that would make you think twice about hanging around the riverbank. And here's the kicker: just like their modern relatives, Hexaprotodon were primarily herbivores. They weren't charging around eating meat. They spent their days grazing, chomping down on grasses and aquatic plants. But as any African safari guide will tell you, herbivore doesn't mean harmless. Hippos are notoriously territorial and aggressive, and they use their teeth as weapons. Supersizing those incisors meant Hexaprotodon wasn't just equipped to graze, it was perfectly armed for combat with rivals or anything foolish enough to get in its way. Fossils tell us that these hippos spread widely across Asia, and possibly even into Africa and Europe, thriving during the Ice Age. Yet despite their terrifying dental display, they vanished about 15,000 years ago. Unlike the marsupial lion, there's little evidence humans hunted them to extinction. Instead, climate change and habitat loss seem to be the culprits. Severe droughts shrank their watery homes, and the giant-toothed hippos simply couldn't adapt fast enough. Now, Americans often think of hippos as cartoonish animals thanks to kids' toys like Hungry Hungry Hippos or the dancing hippos in Disney's Fantasia. But the reality is brutal. Even today's hippos kill more people in Africa each year than lions or crocodiles. So picture their extinct cousin with even bigger dental hardware, and you start to realize why this animal was a true nightmare of the waterways. The lesson here? Teeth aren't just about eating, theory about power, territory, and survival. And while Hexaprotodon ruled Asia's rivers, another group of giants on land was evolving even stranger tusks and jaws. From straight-tusked titans to shovel-jawed oddballs, the elephant family was just getting started in redefining what teeth could do. When we think of elephants, their tusks are the obvious standout feature. We know they're modified incisor-sized teeth that never stop growing. But what if I told you that some prehistoric elephants turned those already massive tusks into the biggest teeth ever recorded, while others re-engineered them into strange tools that looked more like farm equipment than fangs? Let's start with the record holder, Paleoloxodon antiquus, the straight-tusked elephant, living during the Ice Age in Europe and parts of Asia. This beast was already enormous, standing over 13 feet tall at the shoulder. But what really set it apart were its tusks stretching up to 16 feet long. That makes them the largest teeth in the history of life on Earth. Imagine 2 telephone poles sticking out of an elephant's face. These tusks were so long they sometimes curved into gentle arcs wider than the animal's own body. They may have been used for defense, display, or perhaps even to sweep aside branches. But one thing's for sure, no dentist on the planet would want to polish them. But if size was one record, strangeness was another. Enter Platybelodon, a distant elephant relative from the Miocene epoch. Unlike modern elephants, this creature didn't sport long curving tusks. Instead, it had 4 tusks, normal ones on top, and 2 bizarre, flattened ones on the bottom that looked like giant shovel blades, or, as some scientists jokingly call them, the ultimate buck teeth. At first glance, Platybelodon looks like evolution made a mistake. How could it even eat with that strange jaw? But studies suggest those shovel-like tusks were far from useless. Paleontologists think these animals used them to strip bark from trees, scoop up vegetation, or even shear plants like built-in machetes. Imagine a massive elephant walking up to a tree, grabbing a branch with its trunk, and then using its bottom teeth like hedge clippers to cut it down. That's not just eating, that's landscaping. What's more, Platybelodon showed strong sexual dimorphism, meaning males had bigger, more robust tusks than females. That suggests those crazy teeth weren't just for feeding, they were also weapons in battles for dominance, much like deer antlers or bison horns. Both Paleoloxodon and Platybelodon show us how flexible evolution can be with something as basic as a tooth. In some cases, bigger meant better. In others, weirder meant survival. Climate change probably played a huge role, too. As environments shifted, these elephants had to adapt their feeding strategies. In drier conditions, being able to strip bark or scoop plants off the ground could mean the difference between thriving and dying out. Here in North America, we tend to think of mammoths and mastodons as our Ice Age icons. But compared to straight-tusked elephants with their telephone pole teeth or shovel-jawed Platybelodons, even mammoths start to look normal. And yet, as strange as elephants became, they still can't compete with the real masters of bizarre dentition, sharks. Because once you've seen a fish with a buzzsaw built into its jaw, you'll never look at the ocean the same way again. Sharks today already get plenty of bad press. Great whites, tiger sharks, hammerheads. Hollywood has made sure they star in our nightmares. But as intimidating as modern sharks are, their prehistoric cousins played in an entirely different league. Millions of years ago, certain sharks evolved teeth so bizarre they look like something out of a horror comic. Buzzsaws, scissors, and even biological pavement. The most famous of these is Helicoprion, sometimes called the buzzsaw shark. Imagine a fish as long as a school bus, cruising the seas 270 million years ago. Now picture its lower jaw. Instead of a neat row of teeth, it carried a spirala, literal whirl of sharp, triangular teeth, like a circular saw blade embedded in its face. To make things even stranger, Helicoprion had no upper teeth at all, just gums. One row of endlessly growing, coiling teeth, spinning forward as old ones wore out. Scientists have puzzled for decades about how this animal actually used its mouth. Some think the saw was used to slice into soft-bodied prey like squid. Others argue it worked like a can opener, cracking open armored animals. Still others imagine the shark ramming its buzzsaw into prey and tearing it apart in a single violent twist. Whatever the truth, one thing's certain, this was no ordinary fish dinner. And Helicoprion wasn't the only dental nightmare in the ocean. Meet Adestus, nicknamed the scissor-toothed shark. Instead of a circular saw, Adestus carried long, curved blades of teeth that jutted out from its jaws. As it thrashed its head back and forth, those blades worked like giant scissors, slicing prey clean in half. Fossil evidence suggests some species grew over 20 feet long, plenty big enough to turn an unsuspecting fish into chum in seconds. Then there were the so-called pavement-toothed sharks, like Stethacanthes and others, whose mouths were filled with broad, flat teeth designed to crush shellfish. Picture a prehistoric shark biting down and pulverizing crabs and clams like they were potato chips. What makes these creatures especially fascinating is that they belong to an extinct order, the Eugeniodonteiforms, that flourished for more than 100 million years. They weren't just weird one-offs, they were successful, dominant predators in their time. It's only by chance, through mass extinctions and evolutionary turnover, that their bizarre jaws didn't make it into the modern ocean. For Americans who tune in religiously to Shark Week or still get chills from Jaws, these ancient sharks take the terror to another level. Forget dorsal fins breaking the water's surface, imagine a buzzsaw silently gliding beneath you. And yet, not all prehistoric dental marvels were about killing. Some were about filtering, straining, and scooping up life too tiny for us to see. Which brings us to one of the strangest flyers the skies have ever known, the whale of the skies. When most people picture pterosaurs, they think of leathery wings, long beaks, and maybe a screeching silhouette against a Cretaceous sunset. But not all pterosaurs looked alike, and one in particular seemed to borrow its design notes from whales rather than birds. Meet Pterodaustro, a Cretaceous pterosaur from South America that scientists often call the flamingo of the Mesozoic. Personally, I think the whale of the skies is even better. Why? Because when you peer into its mouth, you don't see the usual pterosaur fangs. Instead, its lower jaw bristled with over 1,000 slender, needle-like teeth, arranged so tightly they looked like the teeth of a comb. At a distance, the effect was eerily similar to baleen keratin plates whales use today to strain plankton from seawater. But unlike baleen, Pterodaustro's filter wasn't soft tissue. It was real bone and enamel, actual teeth. Imagine this creature skimming over a prehistoric lake, dipping its scoop-like lower jaw into the water, and filtering out tiny crustaceans, plankton, and algae. It was a giant net on wings, a living sieve. Some researchers believe it may have even fed at night, using its enormous eyes to spot swarms of plankton glowing in the moonlit water. And it wasn't small, either. Pterodaustro had a wingspan of up to 8 feet. Picture a gull the size of a grown man, skimming water with a jawful of needles, scooping up invisible prey. Not terrifying in the sense of being hunted, but uncanny enough to make you stare in disbelief. Here's the kicker. Those fragile teeth never regenerated. Unlike sharks, which constantly replaced their dental arsenal, Pterodaustro had to make its 1,000 tiny needles last a lifetime. How it managed without breaking them all remains a mystery. But clearly it worked well enough the species thrived for millions of years. For Americans used to thinking of pterosaurs as sharp-toothed, reptilian hunters, Pterodaustro flips the script. It wasn't a predator of flesh and blood, it was a filter feeder, more interested in a mouthful of plankton than a juicy dinosaur. Yet in its own way, that made it just as strange, just as nightmarish, and maybe even more memorable. And with that, we've covered everything from guillotine jaws to hammer faces, from buzzsaws to baleen lookalikes. But before we land, let's zoom out and ask, what do all these bizarre teeth tell us about life on Earth? And what lessons can we draw from them today? Looking back on this tour of prehistoric mouths, a pattern starts to emerge. Teeth aren't just about chewing food theory survival tools, weapons, and in some cases, the very keys to dominance. 1. Teeth as survival tools. From the 1,000-tooth dental batteries of Hadrosaurs to the shovel-shaped jaws of Platybelodon, teeth evolved to match diets and environments. If you needed to grind tough plants into mush, you grew more teeth than you knew what to do with. If bark was your food source, you reshaped your tusks into saws. If algae coated the seafloor, you built yourself a hammer jaw to scrape it clean. 2. Teeth as weapons. For predators like the marsupial lion, teeth weren't for chewing, they were for killing fast and efficiently. Its guillotine-like premolars turned a bite into an execution. Hexaprotodon, meanwhile, armed itself with supersized incisors, not for eating meat but for fighting rivals. And sharks like Adaptations wielded their teeth like scissors, slicing prey into pieces with each thrash of their heads. In the prehistoric arms race, teeth were often the sharpest sword. 3. Teeth as filters. Then you've got the outliers like Pterodaustro and Atopodentatus. These animals used their strange jaws not to pierce or crush, but to filter, strain, or scrape. They remind us that not every dental nightmare was bloody. Sometimes the nightmare was simply the sheer oddity of seeing a creature with 1,000 tiny needles or a hammer-shaped jaw scouring the ocean floor. 4. Overspecialization comes with risks. One big theme that jumps out is how dangerous it can be to put all your evolutionary eggs in one basket. A buzzsaw jaw might dominate when prey is plentiful, but once the ecosystem changes, you're toast. Same with hammer jaws or shovel-tusked great while the environment stays stable, but useless when conditions shift. Many of the creatures we met today are extinct not because their teeth failed, but because their specialized tools left them vulnerable when climates changed or humans arrived. 5. Climate and extinction. From Platybelodon adapting to arid environments, to Hexaprotodon disappearing during droughts, to sharks vanishing after mass extinctions. Climate change has always shaped life's winners and losers. The teeth of prehistory are like a record book, showing us how species tried to adapt and how many ultimately couldn't. 6. Why it matters today. So why should Americans in the 21st century care about the jaw of some extinct shark? Because these stories are reminders of adaptability and fragility. Evolution is endlessly creative, but it isn't forgiving. In a changing world, being too specialized can be a death sentence. That lesson is as relevant to ecosystems today as it was millions of years ago. And on a lighter note, these stories put our own dental problems into perspective. Cavities? Crooked molars? Wisdom teeth that need pulling? Annoying? Sure. But at least we don't have to floss too. 000 teeth. Sharpen a guillotine in our jaw. Or worry about snapping a buzzsaw every time we bite into dinner. So there you have it. A whirlwind tour through the strangest mouths ever to snap, grind, scrape, or filter their way across Earth. From the marsupial lion's guillotine jaws to the hammer-faced algae eater. From dinosaurs with thousands of molars to sharks carrying buzzsaws in their skulls. Evolution has proven one thing over and over again: teeth are nature's favorite playground. For us humans, our dental problems can feel like a curse. Cavities, braces, root canals. Nobody enjoys a trip to the dentist. But compared to what prehistoric creatures dealt with, our 32 relatively boring teeth are a blessing. We don't need to replace them by the thousands. We don't have to sharpen them daily. And we don't risk snapping a 3-foot tusk just to chew on dinner. More importantly, these ancient jaws tell us something about survival. Teeth evolved to meet the challenges of an environment, whether that's crushing shells, slicing prey, or filtering plankton. But when the environment changes too quickly, even the most impressive dental arsenal can't guarantee survival. That's why Helicoprions' buzzsaw, Platybelodon's shovel teeth, and Hexaprotodon's oversized incisors are all gone, while our modest molars remain. So next time you're leaning back in the dentist's chair, nervously eyeing that tray of shiny tools, remember, it could be worse. You could be flossing 2,000 hadrosaur molars. You could be sharpening the scalpel-thin teeth of a conodont. You could be hauling around tusks longer than a pickup truck. Suddenly, a cavity or two doesn't sound so bad, does it? And maybe, just maybe, you'll thank your lucky stars that the scariest thing in your mouth is a dentist's drill, and not a prehistoric buzzsaw waiting to spin. What do you think, whose teeth gave you the biggest chills? The buzzsaw shark? The 1,000-toothed hadrosaur? Or maybe the hippo with too many front teeth? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear which dental nightmare you'd never want to meet in real life. If you enjoyed this prehistoric deep dive, give it a like. Share it with a friend who loves dinosaurs or Shark Week. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next wild chapter from Earth's ancient zoo. Got a question about other bizarre prehistoric animals, or maybe about why our own teeth are so fragile? Ask away in the comments, and I'll tackle your curiosities in future posts. Because when it comes to the history of life on Earth, the stories just keep getting stranger and we've only scratched the surface.